Hi, my name is Dr. Jennifer Maxfield DiCarlo, and I'm going to be moderating a panel of experts. Each one of you is incredible experts. We're so glad that you're here. I am the clinical director at Safe Harbor Behavioral Care, and so just really happy that you're here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the panel, and then we'll get started. So first we have Kristen. She is a student pastor at Mountain Christian Church and a mom of two. So we're so glad that you're here, Kristen. And then we have Sarah. And Sarah is a special ed teacher. And so she has access to students all the time who really are have mental health needs and talking with parents and teachers. And so we're so glad that you're here. She's a mom of two. Really glad you're here, Sarah. And then we have Eric, who is the CEO and founder of Safe Harbor Behavioral Care. And he was a youth pastor at one point in his life, right, Eric? And so we're so glad that you're here as well. And then we have three counselors that are joining us from Safe Harbor Behavioral Care. Jenna, who has specialized in working with trauma and also has extensive experience working with children and adolescents. So we're glad you're here. Verlene, she is not only a counselor, but she is also the CEO of Wellness Network Group. And the mother of five. So happy that you're here and looking forward to your expertise. And then last but not least, we have Mark, who is a counselor for Safe Harbor and also has two children, and he is really specialized. He does applied behavioral analysis, play therapy, sand tray therapy. So we're so glad that you're here as well, Mark. So I'm just going to go ahead and start the discussion, right? We know that this is just such a huge topic, and often a topic that parents come to and they're just thinking, I don't know what to do, right? I don't know if my kid is just, this is normal for being a teenager. They're experiencing symptoms. Is that normal? Is that not normal? Is there something I need to do as a parent to really ensure that I can recognize if there's a mental health issue? And so I just want to throw out, I love statistics. I just love them. So just want to throw out there is that this is such an important issue because 1 in 5 teenagers experience depression at one point in their life. And 1 in 8 teenagers experience anxiety. We've seen that number increase. In depression alone, we have seen an increase of 10% in 4 years. And when we're looking at statistics, we're talking about the statistics from 2020. That doesn't even include what may have happened and what we might be seeing as the pandemic has continued. And most importantly, that 50% of the mental health issues that we see in children or in adults have started before the age of 14. Wow. So these are really, when I think about that and I think I've got 5 children and I start thinking about that, I think, okay, how do we equip parents to be able to recognize the difference between normal, quote unquote, normal growth and development in our children versus actually a mental health issue. So I just want to throw that out to the panel. How do we determine the difference between mental health issues that are really exacerbated or just normal development?
You know, Jennifer, as you're talking, I'm kind of thinking that a reaction on the part of a student should be commensurate with what it is that's going on. For example, when I was a new parent and my kids weren't that old, we'd go to the beach and they'd ride the waves. Eventually, when they got old enough, maybe they're 5, 6, 7, riding some small ones. And if a big wave came and they went under the water, I wouldn't panic because that was normal. I'm like, that's a lot of water. They're under the water. If a little wave came, I expected them to be under less time. And so I'm kind of judging by that. And that's just kind of the framework that came to my mind as you were talking. Is it commensurate, what I'm seeing, with what reality is? Is that an appropriate response, or is it something more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, that just brings up the fact that sometimes kids are going through transitions, right? Maybe they're transitioning from middle school to high school or elementary school to middle school, or they're transitioning out of like playing a sport and stop playing a sport. And so there could be some bumps there. Those are those waves. But what we're really looking for is those sustained
Yeah.
changes in behavior.
You know, Jennifer, it's funny you mentioned transition. They did studies with children with autism. The frequency of maladaptive behaviors, which was physical aggression, verbal aggression, was due to transition. This was going from home to school, transitioning from one assignment to another, from one class to another. And it also shows a lot of those behaviors that would surface in the morning time, you know, afternoon when they're coming home, which increases that anxiety. So these are the things that's good for parents to know so we can be more proactive and not reactive, so we can kind of reduce some of those, those anxious behaviors.
Yeah. When I was thinking about what you said about just parents just feeling like what is normal, just as a mom myself of 5, first of all, just letting the parents know that you're not alone with these teenage years and how you're feeling. So let's just get that out, that you're not alone with just feeling this anxiety, the stress of just all that goes on with your teens. But when you're thinking about the norms, we're thinking about some things are developmental in this age. So when you're thinking about they're trying to find their identity, so they're not going to think that your ideas are the best. They're going to think that their friends have more value than you. So you'll know that that's kind of norm. But I would say, especially for moms, trust that instinct when you see some things that are especially lasting for a long period of time. When you see that they are showing signs of sadness, depression, not wanting to talk, or just those things that is just not the norm, and it's lasting for a period of time. Trust that in you, and just check in. Just check in. Use the term. Just start off with a non-threatening. I've noticed. I noticed that when you come home now, you stay in your room for a long period of time. Those kind of things are just to kind of help ease that. Just check in. Don't be afraid to check in.
And to kind of
Yeah.
go off of that, I would say, as I'm not a professional, I'm a parent, but whenever you're in doubt of the situation or where your kid may be, like, it's okay to reach out and ask for help. It's okay to have your child meet with a counselor and let the counselor help you decide and support you through that and making the decision if your kid needs more help or not. You guys are there for that, and I appreciate that. Thank you for being there for that and being able to support us parents in making that decision. So ever in doubt, follow your instinct, but if you're ever in doubt and you just don't know where to go or what to do,
Yes.
reach out. It's healthy and safe to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I'll just add, just to piggyback off of everybody, I think it's just important for you had mentioned earlier, like normal in quotes, like what is normal for your child, right? Like, so some kids are super extroverted. And so if you notice, well, now your teen is not wanting to go hang out with friends on the weekends like they usually do, like that's a good indication. But if your teen is typically a bit more introverted and doesn't typically want to go hang out with friends, that might not be a concern for you, but maybe they're not reading as much as they used to read, and that was something they really enjoyed doing. And so normal is relative, and it's okay to not maybe compare your teen to the other teen in their youth group. Look at what your teen's normal, behavior is, and then from there decide, is this concerning, is this problematic? But like you mentioned, when in doubt, there's never any, harm in just getting a second opinion from somebody who is a bit more trained to notice, what might be a good warning sign for you that your teen might be in a little bit more trouble.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Something that I've heard almost all of you say is that you're paying attention to the changes in behavior.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And parents ask me all the time, what can I do? Like, what can I do to be proactive? And number one is, and we'll talk more about this, but communication, like you're saying, Jenna. But the other thing is to be paying attention, right? We all are really busy. But when I see my kid's demeanor change and wonder what's going on, just paying attention and leaning into that to have conversations is so, so important. So for me, that makes me think it's not really so much about, it is about behavior, but it's about changes in behavior,
Yes.
right? Because we know our kids and how they usually are. If I'm looking at my kids and I'm thinking, oh, they shouldn't be staying in their bedroom all day, right? Well, okay, if that's a change, then that's a problem. But my kids are in their bedroom probably more than I'd like to admit, right? So it's really the changes in behavior. Is there anything else that you can think of that is really important just to really highlight changes in behavior? Because so many things, we talk about teenagers and like, well, are they sleeping excessively?
Yeah.
Check mark, right? That could be
Right.
normal. They're
It could
teenagers,
be their
right?
eating.
Yeah.
Just something that you see their eating pattern changes.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
So really we're looking at change.
We're looking at change, and you mentioned one thing important, just paying attention.
Yeah.
And that's why I definitely just zoned in on those moms. You know your child better than anyone, and so some of the norms that you are used to seeing them. And we know that they evolve and they change, but just the key word that you say, just being present and paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jennifer, I think the kind of category that we're talking around is the category of functionality. And so just how are they functioning, all those basic life demands,
Yeah.
school, friendships,
Absolutely.
physical,
Yeah.
spiritual, mental, all those areas, what's their functioning. And I think like Jenna
Yeah.
said, that takes also really knowing who your child is. When you know what's normal for them. It's personalized and customized. That's one of those foundational
Yeah.
Yeah.
things that then pays off when you've built that foundation of knowing who that child is as a person.
Yeah. Oh, Eric, you mentioned school because I remember for myself personally with my son, who's now 20, but one of the red flags for me was just seeing his grades decline. It wasn't like he was verbally acting out or a whole bunch, that
Right.
it was just, but I saw that, I noticed that, what's going on? That was a red flag for me, So yeah, as you mentioned, just looking at all those areas. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think one thing that parents often will say to me is that, my kid has been sad, right? But then when you explore that a little bit more, you realize that there's a lot of situational stuff going on. So that could be a very normative reaction, right? So we're not talking about the kid who gets anxious when they're about to, jump into their basketball game, right? Like there's a little bit of anxiety that should happen there, right? We're talking about sustained, right? Sustained and maybe more excessive symptoms, anxiety, sadness, things
One
like
of the things
that.
that kind of helped me was it was explained to me as is the anxiety or the depression or the sadness, however we want to say it, is it interrupting their day-to-day life?
Right.
Or is it just a section here where they got a bad grade on a test and they're upset about it? And so if they cannot live their life without thinking or stressing about a test or just whatever it is, friends, and it's a constant thing across, it's just taking over their mind and it's like they're captive in there. That's a problem, right? You can't function that way. And so as a parent, that was really helpful to kind of distinguish between, okay, are you just sad or you just like worried because you have something important coming up, or is this anxiety and depression and do we really need to seek out some more help? So
Yeah.
It's so good. So good. Yeah. So one of the things that kind of comes up for me is you mentioned in getting involved in counseling in some way, right? Like where's the line where, okay, I see some concerns. When should I reach out for a mental health and just maybe get an evaluation? Like you said, maybe just talk to somebody to see if they can help me understand what's going on and help me support my child, right? Where the line is for that. And I think there's some barriers sometimes to doing that. Have you all experienced that? Have you heard that from students or from kids?
Yes,
Some
I was going
barriers.
to say some of the biggest barriers the students talk to me about is when they finally either get the courage to talk to their parents about it or their parents have a conversation with them about it, is that it feels very it's just harsh. It doesn't feel natural. They really can't talk naturally about it and openly about it. Or a parent might say, "Oh, you'll be fine. You'll get over it. You don't need it." And so the kid feels this shutdown or this wall to the process because they may have reached out to the parent, but the parent doesn't accept. Or if the parent reaches out, it's not in the term the kid needs, and the kid might not accept. So those are the two barriers that I see happening the most.
Yeah, I think there's a really I think every family should really consider, do we have a culture around conversation?
Yes.
Yes.
And how do we conversate around things? You know, you think about, most of us go to the doctor since we're babies, right? And
Yeah.
we get vaccinated, or we get boosters, or we get, you know, we have a
Yep, we
cold.
check in.
There is a very normalized conversation around physical health, right? And so it's very rare that your child would be nervous to tell you they have a fever or I have a cold, right? It's very common to be like, Mom, I've got a fever, or I'm hot, or I'm not feeling well, I have a cough, I don't want to go to school. That's normal, right? Those don't raise super big alarms. But when it comes to mental health, if there's not a culture around having those same conversations, it can be very anxiety provoking, both for the child and the parent, because we're not really creating this comfortability around having
Right,
that type
right.
of dialogue. And so I think, you know, just some practical tips for parents is, one, how you ask your questions. So how many of you have asked your kid, how was your day? What's their typical response?
Fine.
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 Good. Fine. Okay. So
Yeah.
what maybe more like directive questions, like, what was the most stressful part of your day today?
Yes.
Right.
Or, you know, what was the weirdest thing that happened to you today? And just asking very direct questions just helps start the conversation.
Yeah.
And then what I tell the parents of the teens that I work with all the time is having this culture of not having the talk or the big talk,
Yes.
but instead having a lot of little talks along the
good.
way,
Yes.
so that when it's time to have a difficult conversation, there's a difference between saying, Dad, I've got a cough,
Right.
I don't feel like going to school, versus I have a fever, like I might need to go to the hospital, right? Like those are two different things, but there's still comfortability around saying both of those. And so there's a difference between saying, like, you know, I just haven't been feeling like myself lately.
Right.
Okay, what does that look like for you? What does that mean for you? And for parents to not assume that you should automatically know the answer or the solution. It's okay to be curious. And I think that really is the key for parents. Be curious. Don't feel like you have to know what that means if my kid isn't feeling like themselves. Ask them what that means for them. And that's going to help them feel more comfortable to share with you.
Yeah.
The more they know you're curious, you genuinely do want to know, and you're not going to label them or assume a title to them.
Absolutely.
As you're talking, Jen, I'm kind of reminded that every family has a culture.
Sure.
So things that happen within that family or that culture, meaning is ascribed to those words, those events, those things, depending on what the culture is. So a great question we'd ask, how does our family view counseling?
Sure.
In the culture of our family,
good.
do we view it that, you know, people who are working on their self-improvement go to therapy? Or do we view it, people who are crazy go to therapy?
Sure.
That matters. That's going to influence how the child hears that conversation.
And I would just challenge parents to really be open,
Be open.
and be willing to hear. And you can validate and not necessarily agree with what your child's saying, but just be open to the fact that counseling is something that sometimes your students really need, and that's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. And
Yeah,
so they need to know that.
Yeah, we were just, you know, just meditating and thinking on that, of how sometimes even as a culture of faith, we sometimes don't think about therapy being one of our support systems. You know, no, don't throw away your tool of prayer, because as one of my mentors, Dr. Anita Phillips, says, she says, you know, prayer is our weapon and therapy is a strategy.
Sure.
You know, it's one of those tools. It's one of those strategies that you can be open to. So you don't have to walk this journey alone. It's something how God will always put support system if we will just be open to see what the strategy may be that he may offer.
So good.
And that therapy, and what I would say is that therapy is for people.
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
Yes.
even
Amen.
as-
Not
that's-
crazy people.
It's for people, even us as clinicians,
Yes.
you know, in order to maintain our wellness as well, so that we can give out. We need that therapy as well when we, you know, when we need support. So it's for people. So parents don't feel that reluctancy to step out and receive the support.
And with that, even as
support.
clinicians
Yeah.
who go to therapy, right? Like we know the tools, we know that, like, we went to school for it, and we
Right.
still need that support. So
Absolutely.
have realistic expectations for yourself as a parent. Like, you're not supposed to know all this stuff, and that's okay. It's okay
Right.
to get help and support, and it's okay that your child gets it from a therapist. just like you wouldn't expect yourself to know how to stitch a wound up, right? You would go to the doctor for that.
Yeah.
It's okay that you may not know how to heal this depression or anxiety in your child. Go to the people who
And
can
you're
help you and
You're not a
Help and
failure.
support.
You're not a failure at all.
Absolutely
not, no.
And that's important, I think, for parents to really look at. You know, is this holding me back from getting my kids counseling or help?
You didn't do anything
And-
wrong. You didn't.
No.
Yeah,
you-
Right.
it's
you-
not about us at that point.
Exactly.
You know, your kid's saying, "I need help," and it's about them.
Yep.
So.
Yes, absolutely.
If we can model great communication, there's a better chance that therapy will be accepted. And we have to ask ourselves, is my communication adding more anxiety to what they already have?
Good.
So we have to be proactive and we have to do priming. You know,
Yes.
what does that look like? You know, we have to plan our conversations. The transitioning from school. You know, hey Paige, I want to talk to you about the dishes. Once you go ahead and finish eating your lunch or your snack or anything, then we can talk about it. And then you can go ahead and go back to doing your homework. So we have to have a starting point and we have to have an ending point, which is priming. And in addition to the pre-mac, the first and third. First we're going to do this and then we're going to do this to kind of minimize that anxiety. So if we model good communication, then they're more likely to go to counseling, because they don't have that fear of opening up and learning how to communicate.
Yeah.
So I think as parents, the challenge is balancing these two things.
Yeah.
It's okay to get help, and therapy is a great thing. Over here, I view you as strong, capable,
Yes.
competent, able to meet life's demands. And sometimes our kids hear one or the other, but to integrate that's the challenge of parenting.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I love what you're saying too, because I mean, so many parents that I talk, and myself too, when my kids were like, I think I need to talk to somebody. And I'm thinking, well, I'm a therapist. Like, why, right? But like, we all feel that way as parents. There's this shame that comes that we're like, oh, I couldn't handle that. Or, ooh, what did I do to get them there? Like, did I do this? Right? And so it's so important for us to realize that mental health concerns come from lots of different areas, right? And so this is not something that we say, oh, well, you know what? Yeah, that's totally my genetics. Or maybe that plays a part, but there's so many factors. So when we start entering into that sort of shame of it and be like, oh, this is my fault, hey, we're modeling that for our kids, right? We're modeling that for our kids. And then our kids are thinking, oh, wow, you know what? It's actually pretty shameful for me to go to counseling. And that's just creating a barrier for them to have somebody to talk to and to have that communication with,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And I
Yeah.
think we communicate not just directly, like having those direct conversations, but kind of like what you were saying, both Mark and Jennifer, that, what's our own idea, and you kind of alluded to this earlier too, about mental health and our own emotions. Are we expressing ourselves?
Right.
Do our kids see us cry and angry and upset and see how we cope with that and handle that? Because that's really how kids learn, is this okay?
Yeah.
We model chores like doing the laundry, washing the dishes, because that's a behavior that we want our kids to hopefully help us with and learn how to do, right? But are we also expressing our emotions around them? I think the greatest gift you can give your child is your own authenticity and your own
Absolutely.
vulnerability.
Absolutely.
And being able to share that space with them, because it makes it a safe space and not a scary space.
Yeah.
And attaching to their emotions.
Right.
Yes.
Recognizing, affirming without judgment. I see that you look worried.
Yeah.
What? Tell me what's going on, or how can I be there for you and help you? You sound angry. I want to understand that more. That's being present to your child's emotions.
Yeah. And you mentioned one key word, non-judgmental.
Yes.
To me, that word just helps with what we're saying to invoke that conversation. And what I found out is that, the greatest thing that we can do is to provide a safe space. We always use that word safe because we want to provide an atmosphere where they feel like they can conversate. And as you said, being vulnerable yourself to say, you know what, like especially during difficult times, to be able to say, you know what, that gave me a lot of anxiety. This is, I can understand how you would feel that, acknowledging that. And, when I was just thinking, just as a mother and my husband and I talking about just conversation of just providing a safe space for our children. We evolved, we learned some things that we didn't do right, and we came up with a thought that safe means a sincere assurance to know that they're free from embarrassment. You know,
So good.
so that they can know that we're sincere. They can know that we are respecting their thoughts and their feelings. We're not just saying it's going to be okay, but we're acknowledging that they're feeling that way and letting them know it's okay to have your feelings. Those feelings are real, and then to work through that. And then they have that assurance, they have that confidence in knowing that, you know, you're there for them, you're going to listen to them, you're going to hear them, you know, and then that they're free from embarrassment. That's the key thing for teens, to know
Yes.
that you're, you know, that they're free from rejection and all the words that you would think about that comes with that word, embarrassment. Absolutely.
And with that safe space and the judgment free, I think also, you know, setting aside time where, like, around the table once a week, once a month, whatever's realistic for your family, where we can talk about anything and there's no consequences, right? Because what a lot of, let's get real, teens experiment with a lot of different things, and sometimes that lands them in trouble. What's the number one reason they don't want to tell you? They don't want to get in trouble.
Absolutely.
Right? And so having a space, if you want your teen to be vulnerable with you, you've got to create an atmosphere where we can talk about things, and punishment's off the table for this period of time. So you can tell me how you snuck out of the house and you ended up somewhere you shouldn't have been, and it was a really scary situation. And me as mom or me as dad, I'm not going to discipline you in this moment. Right now, I want you to just be able to tell me about that and what that was like. Even asking them, well, what did you get out of that? You know, what, a lot of times they're already punishing themselves, right? Through, you know, talking down to themselves or telling themselves that they're a bad person. And the enemy is not short of, of ways to try to get your teen down, okay? And so really kind of assess there, okay, after you hear from them, hear what they learned, what's my next step from here? And have them be a part of the consequence if there is one. Okay, well, what do you think is appropriate? Should I let you go out again this weekend? What do you think? Right? Like, let them have some input and some buy-in.
I would also add on that of like, listen without reacting. And that also means watch your facial expressions, watch your body language, because the more you react, the more their wall is going to go up. Even if it's like a, you know, like you think they didn't see that, like they're watching. And so to see how you're reacting to what they're saying. And if you can practice your game face, even in the mirror, if you need to take a few seconds of like before you enter those meetings or whatever, like just try not to react and really just listen and be present. And you'll be amazed the doors that opens for all kinds of conversations. So.
Y'all know as parents, that parent alert goes off really quick. It goes off really quick. You know, daughters, if you have daughters, I met this guy. Oh, wait, hold up. You're not old enough to date. You know, automatically, you know, our parent alert goes to the defensive mode, trying to protect them and all that. And that's good. But again, just allowing them, that could be a great opportunity. Oh, I met this guy, to talk about and open the conversation to what that should look like. And
Your words
you
can be
know,
bridges
sexuality.
or they can be barriers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, Verlene,
Yeah.
I love what you're drawing attention to, is that it can be about what's happening in us, that we shift subtly from being present to our child to, I feel anxious, what they just told me. I have to do something with this anxiety.
yes.
I know, I'll fix them and get the desired result, then I'll feel less anxious.
Right.
It's become about me, not about being present
So
to them.
good.
So good. Yes, absolutely.
I think Ephesians 5 and 6 really paints that picture of not provoking your child. A lot of times, rather than be parents, we want to be their God. We want to control everything.
Yeah.
We want to tell them what to do. You know, we want to. We don't want to give them. You have favoritism. And one of the things I found out is, in terms of attention, is how often are we encouraging them? You know, are we doing more, asking them to do demands or tasks more so than encouragement? You know, we put them in these AAU teams, you know, which is tough. You know, we put them in these AP classes, and we say, hey, you got to study harder. But there's no encouragement. You know, there's no, hey, you know, great job. And also, too, we have to be transparent. You know, going back to being our child's God, we have flaws as well. You know, and a lot of times we borrow from a lot of these old traditional families is we can't do no wrong, but it's okay to say, hey, I messed up, or I'm sorry for that, or hey, I experienced what you went through before.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you're saying is, I feel like there's a lot of parents out there that's totally opposite from their culture and how they grew up and how their
Yes,
parents.
yes.
And so you have to be willing to make a shift, right?
That's good.
Because I've worked with a lot of parents over the years, and a lot of feedback I get when I encourage, let's do positive reinforcement, is why should I be praising them for something they should be doing, right? And so the only thing your kids are then hearing then is what they shouldn't be doing and when they're doing something wrong. If that's the only message, and I know that's not the intention, right? Most parents have really, really, really great intentions, right? But if you think about, okay, well, what is the constant message my child is hearing? It's only when they're doing something wrong that I acknowledge their behavior at all. Well, if they want your attention, what are they going to keep doing? The wrong thing, because that's how they get your attention.
Wow.
And so if you're giving them attention by giving them positive reinforcement, and yes, their job is to do the chores, but you just saying, thank you, that was awesome. Like, you did it actually
good.
pretty quick this time.
good.
What do you think they're going to want to do next time? The dishes.
Right.
So it's different. You've got to be willing to look at how you're doing it and be willing to make a shift. And it's never too late to make that
Never
shift.
too late.
Yeah. And by
Never
the
too
way,
late.
attention is attention. Negative attention is just as reinforcing as positive attention.
Exactly.
The worst is no attention.
Yes.
So that's one of the things we got to keep in mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I'm listening to you all talk, I'm thinking of, is it Stephen Covey who says, keep the main thing the main thing?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right? And for me, as a parent, that was a huge shift for me
Yeah.
of the main thing is our relationship.
It's good.
Like all that stuff, like the bad choices that you make along the way and all those things, like, well, we got to talk about that. We got to set parameters. The main thing is our relationship. So when you do something that is something you know I wouldn't approve of, right? If my relationship is there, my kids come and tell me,
Right.
guess what, Mom? I totally messed up today. And I'm like, this kid just came and told me, like, I don't have to pry anything. She just came and told me that they absolutely screwed up. And then the relationship stays the relationship because that's where it's coming from, is to really be able to then have those conversations and say, okay, well, how are you going to do it differently? What do you think could have impacted this? But the communication and the relationship doesn't get destroyed in the process.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's where you can kind of monitor growth in your relation when they can come to you.
Yes.
When they start coming to you to initiate that conversation, parents, that's where you can start celebrating some growth
Yes.
and continue the process. Don't give up. Just continue the steps in the process until you start seeing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Comforting thought
Yeah.
to me as a parent before my kids were adults was thinking spiritually from the perspective that God is about restoration.
Yes.
So things that aren't perfect, mistakes, that's God's job, is to restore that. But that restoration flows through relationships.
That's
So
good,
good.
Eric.
It's my
That's so
job
good.
to keep that relationship
Yes.
connected.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have to tell a little story, right? I just brag a little on my kids. The other day, my daughter came home and I could tell, like, her demeanor was just different, right? So she got in the car, we were talking, and I was like, so tell me what's going on in your day today. And she told me some stuff, and I was like, the mom flag was going
That
off.
alert.
And I was like, what else? What
Right.
else was going on? Nothing. I said, oh, you know what? I really feel like there was something else. If I'm wrong, I would love that. But like, if there's something we need to talk about, we should talk about it. And then she told me about some bad choices she made. And she put it out there and she was like, Mom, I really don't want to tell you this. And I was like, oh, I can tell that you're really anxious about it. But here's the thing. I don't care what it was. What I care about is our relationship. What I care about is the restoration. So, if you tell me and we preserve the relationship, regardless of if there's going to be punishment or not, we're preserving what you and I have. And then she was like, okay. And then she told me what was going on and we dealt with that. But that's exactly it. It's like those moments where I could have been like, all right, if you don't tell me when you get home, here's the list of things that you're going to have to do. And we're not going to, and it could have gotten in between us. But instead, we were able to, and rest assured, there's still consequences, right? There's positive reinforcement. There's still consequences.
Right. Still
But it didn't disrupt our relationship.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's
Jennifer,
good.
you're
That's
you're
good.
speaking to an internal process that you went through of getting comfortable with things not being perfect and being able to say, okay, when I'm not comfortable with that, I need things to be perfect. What is
Yeah.
that about?
Yeah.
What am I compensating for? What over here am I trying to solve that's unresolved in me? And I'm playing it out on my child. You're kind of speaking to that whole process.
Absolutely.
That definitely is one of the things that students reach out about all the time, is that they feel they have to be a persona. Parents want them to get into the best schools and be the best in the sports, and on social media their friends want them to have the best trips and do the best things, and they have this pressure to be this thing, and underneath they're really something different. And so where is the pressure coming from? And if we're blind to our own faults and spaces as parents on putting pressure on the kids, they feel like they can't come to us about it because the pressure is coming from us.
Yeah.
So how could we resolve it if that's where it's coming from? So noticing the places where the kids have the pressure and opening that conversation, even talking about your own work pressures and things that stress you out, and being open about those things around conversations are good for kids to know that everyone experiences that, but making them be real instead of fake, because the pressure to be fake right now is huge.
Yes.
It's huge.
And it adds to the problem, that anxiety and the
Yes.
depression that may already be there. And
Yes.
it just piles up. And
Yeah.
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 You know, I've had parents say to me before, like, we make sure that we never fight in front of our kids. Like, we never let them see that, right? And I'm thinking, like, okay, and I don't want to say I'm advocating we don't want to have physical fights ever, right? Like,
Right.
that's not what I'm talking about. But we never have arguments in front of our kids,
How
and
do
we
you learn to
never
resolve
raise our
conflict?
voice. And I think it really is important because they don't get to see the process of conflict resolution
Yes.
if we don't let them into what's clearly developmentally appropriate for them, right? But being able to allow them into that process to see our vulnerability, like you were mentioning, Sarah, and just to be able to let them see that at some level, right? That's appropriate. We don't want that to create an unsafe space.
Right.
That's not what I'm talking about. But sometimes it's important to let children and teens see you resolve those things, because it equips them to be able to do that as well.
Yes.
It allows them to put their walls down and see that,
Yeah.
oh, my parents aren't perfect. It's okay for me not to be perfect, because they're in that stage at times where it's like, oh, my parents are always on me about doing this, and they're just perfect and they do nothing wrong, kind of thing. Some with teens, I guess, but then it allows them to really see who you are, and like, you do make mistakes, and it is okay to make
Yes.
mistakes. So it's important for sure.
Yeah, I think an atmosphere of authenticity is such a
Yes.
relief.
It
You know,
is.
when we can create a culture where we're not dealing with things as they should be, but we're comfortable with things as they are, it's a relief for us, and it's a relief for our kids. Then they
Absolutely.
feel like they don't have to measure up to some, unrealistic expectation. And I think, to your point, you were saying earlier, a minute ago, I was thinking about that a lot of times it's subtle. It's the subtle nuances where maybe as the parent, we have not projected onto our child that they need to achieve something. We've not put that pressure, but somehow along the way they internalized,
Yeah.
did it to themselves. Maybe they saw a sibling excel at something and they didn't process that so well. That triggered their own sense of inferiority. Maybe they're looking at us and saying, wow, I don't think I can be like mom or dad when I grow up. That's a lot to accomplish and achieve.
Yeah.
I don't think I can have the PhD when I grow up like Dr. Maxfield DiCarlo, or run that moderator table like a total boss and own it. Like, they're thinking all these things in their head.
Yes.
And we need to tune in to where they are and not be defensive as parents and make it about us. Well, I know I did it right. I know I didn't do that.
And I think that's where it comes into having not the big talk, but all the little talks,
Yeah, like what
because
you said
that's
about the
where
little
we
talks. Yeah.
that's where we can talk about that kind
Yeah,
of stuff.
yeah.
Something I recommend to families is at the dinner table, do something like high, low, grow. What was the high of your day? What was the low of your day? Where's an area that you're working on? What's something you learned? What's like your growth? It can be
Yeah.
what's God speaking to you? What's God
That's
challenging?
good.
I mean, you can bring in, the Lord into that process, but again, that's an opportunity to say, well, the low of my day was I got a D in this class and I really want straight A's.
Right.
Well, maybe you guys never really had a conversation around
Yeah.
expectations around grades and success. It's a little conversation that's going to have a really big impact.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
And
it's-
oh, go ahead.
I would say I think it's important for parents to be in that conversation and tell
Yeah.
their highs and lows and their growths.
Exactly.
That's what I was.
Yeah.
Yes, because
Yep.
kids feel under the microscope that they're the ones that only have to do that, only have the area of
Yes.
growth. But for parents to be real and say, I'm growing in this area, or I messed up in this area, or this was really hard for me today.
And you know what's really key for parents? If you did, again, you're not perfect, right? Reconciliation. And if you did respond or you reacted in a way that you're not proud of, to go back to your child, maybe in that high-low grow, in that grow moment, and say, you know what, yesterday when I raised my voice at you and I had a tone,
Yes.
I didn't feel good about that after. I'm really sorry.
Yes, definitely doesn't
That
show
is
weakness.
so
It's so key.
Healing
Yes.
for your child to hear you apologize to them for things that you may not be proud of and how
Absolutely.
you treated them.
So this key of authenticity, I think, is a
Yes.
great tool that parents can grab hold to and embrace.
Yes.
It can lead to that conversation that we were talking about earlier. How say that I'm afraid because in my past this is what some things happened and I didn't make I didn't make all the right decisions, and these were some of the consequences. That way, like you said, they can the walls can come down. They can see it more of a conversation than an attack. But I love what you said, Jenna, about the little talks, you know, along the way. Driving in the car, looking out the window, hey, you know, think of some thoughts. And it doesn't always have to be a tense situation.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
just teaching along the way, you know, sharing rather along the way.
The car is a really great place to
Yeah.
have tough conversations
Because they
you don't have
can't
to look
leave,
to
right?
each other.
And they can't leave.
And you don't have to be staring at each other, right?
Yes,
They're able
yes.
to like look at other things, and it's not like that intensity where I'm staring at you, telling you what I'm
Right.
upset about. The car is a really great place.
The car.
And you know what? Even as you're saying that, I'm feeling convicted. I'm like, how many times am I on the phone in the car, and the kids are in the car, and I'm robbed of opportunity, right? I'm robbed of opportunity of being present. So,
Yeah.
I mean, not that we can't all have occasional phone calls in the car, but still, like that's such an
That
opportunity.
is an
for
opportunity
that.
to connect.
It's
So along
amazing.
the authenticity thing, I think one of the powerful storylines that I've seen in conversations with kids is when it's the storyline of let me take inventory of my life where God has worked, where growth has happened, and how that's been in the context of failure.
Oh, yeah.
And being able to say to them in appropriate ways to their age, hey, let me tell you, share little tidbits. You know, where I grew a lot was in this failure. When this thing happened, that turned into a really great opportunity, not an obstacle, but a jumping off point. It gives a whole different perspective and takes that pressure off that it's more about self-awareness and growth than it is looking really good and having your life together.
Oh,
Yes,
so
that
good.
was good. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, when you're saying that, I was thinking about what was your biggest failure today? Just to create the culture of failure. Failure is
It's part
okay. It's
Yeah,
part of
yeah.
life,
Yeah.
right? And so being able to look at it, and then we're like, oh my goodness, what would you do differently this time? If you could do it again, what would you do it differently, right?
I love that.
And we do that too. And oftentimes it results in those conversations of, yeah, I did yell at you the other day and I felt horrible, right? And this is how I'd like to do it differently. So good.
I remember as a young teenager, I was at a basketball camp for a week, and it was a player on the then Washington Bullets named Wes Unseld, who was the center. You remember him, Mark? And he had this youth camp at like Bowie State College and different colleges. And you get a player handbook, and there'd be motivational things. And I'll never forget being a 12-year-old kid reading this list of things in a person's life. Failed in business, 1845. Divorced in 1846. Child died. And you get all the way to the bottom of like 20 things. You've seen this. And it says elected president of the United States. It was Abraham Lincoln. And I'd never seen that as a 12-year-old kid. And it really took the pressure off. And I thought,
Yeah.
wow, when you fail at things, 'cause it was kind of intimidating, being at an NBA players camp, and there were some really good players there. And I was a little bit intimidated. And reading that, it just changed the whole perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you say that, Eric, I think, okay, what do we want to leave parents with? Parents who are listening to this right now, like, I know we've talked about authenticity, we've talked about communication, but are there any other things that we want people to walk away from this panel saying, here's some keys? Like, it's hard sometimes. It's sometimes that we need to create a shift, and, whether we're giving some positive reinforcement or punishment, like, those are things. What are the top things that you want parents to walk away from this panel encouraged with?
I would say empower the child. Don't be afraid to explore their world. My son might play Minecraft. wow, I noticed you played Minecraft a lot. Wow, can you teach me? And you'd be surprised how you can communicate in an indirect way, because now you can actually see in the behavior versus what they say. Then, oh wow, this kid was talking about this game. Have you ever heard of it? Yeah, show me. And what that does, they feel accepted, they feel appreciated, and you can kind of build on that. And it's great because now when we talk about environmental enrichment, what does the home environment look like? Is it they're coming home, you got to do all this tasks and work? No, we talk about reinforcement, right? I can't tell you how many times I play Monopoly, with my clients because it's something about, play. And by the way, we always talk about adolescence, but a lot of these children, I mean, it's starting before adolescence, And in terms of play therapy, some children are not able to express themselves, 11 years old and down, they don't have the vocabulary to do that. Some do, most don't. So what do? Let's play some Monopoly. Let's play Uno. Show me more about the video games you're doing. And you'd be surprised. It starts there, and then next thing you know, you're having a conversation about an incident that took place in school.
It's good.
I think I would want to leave with parents to just remind them it's never too late to evolve. It's never too late to whatever tools that maybe grabbed you as we were talking in our conversation. Even if you found something in conversation that you see that you didn't, come up to snuff with, as you were saying, Jennifer, but just know that it's never too late to evolve. The fact that you're embracing and even listening to this conversation lets me know that you have a heart to change. You have a heart for growth. And then finally, just knowing that God is with you. Mm-hmm. Pull those tools out, every situation that we have, there is a word for it. There is a solution for it. And never forget that God is with you through the journey, through the process. And you're not alone. You're not alone.
I want to second, my colleagues and just add, take a deep breath, right? You've heard a lot of information. Yeah. And speaking from a recovering perfectionist, maybe not so far into recovery, I'm still working on it. You may, if you're like me, you can hear all this information and just automatically begin to ding yourself. Why didn't I think about that? And you're not hearing this as encouragement. You're hearing this as I'm failing. I've failed as a mom, I've failed as a dad, and you're beating yourself up for it. I want to tell you to take a deep breath. It's okay. There's a lot of things my colleagues and friends have shared here that I had never heard of before either. We're
still evolving.
Be committed to being a lifelong learner. Your kids are teens now. They'll be in their 20s later and in their 30s, and you're going to continue to learn and grow in how to be the best parent in that relationship as they grow. It's okay. Pick one thing you heard today and try it.
Yeah.
Pick one thing. Pick one thing. Maybe that's, making that counseling appointment or getting your own to get feedback. Maybe that's, having that conversation with your kid in the car ride home today. Pick one thing, try that, and then add more as you want, but it's okay. It's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
It's okay if you feel overwhelmed. Take a deep breath. Just take it step by step.
Amen.
So I think I would leave parents with, and I'm speaking to myself on this too, I like to accomplish things and achieve things. And God's given us the responsibility of achieving tasks and engaging in loving relationships. And sometimes in tasks, that shortest distance from point A to point B, it might be streamlined. I mean, in our business end of Safe Harbor, we're all about streamlining, right, Jennifer? Relationships don't work that way. There can be a lot of damage in my wake if I'm looking at this relationship like it's about me achieving a result, and I'm going to do it the shortest point from point A to point B. So that would be the thing I would leave parents with, is just respect that relationships don't work like tasks
That's
sometimes
good.
work.
I would say be open. Be open to having the conversations, be open to changing your mind, be open to listening. Kids feel, my parents don't understand. They feel a generational gap. We are different from them. And so just being open and being consistently showing up. consistently listening, consistently being there. I think that's the big things that the kids want.
Yeah.
Because this world's so inconsistent right now and unpredictable, they want somebody to be consistent.
That's good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't even really know what to add to all that. You guys did great with that. I guess I would just say, to kind of add on, is give yourself grace.
Yeah.
Give
Yes.
your student grace. Like, what they're living through now is completely different, even from 10 years ago. And it's hard. It's really hard. And they may not know how to express that in all the ways. Maybe they act out for attention, whatever that is, but just give them grace and be consistent and persistent and keep showing up for them day after day.
So good.
Yeah, so good.
I would just add, watch the movie Elf with them. Take spaghetti, pour syrup in it, get a
My
bag
son's
of mini
favorite movie.
M&Ms.
Definitely have
Stir
fun
those
with
in.
your students.
Yes.
They need fun too. So yeah.
After all of that,
solid
just go to
advice.
Elf.
Yeah, it all comes back
Put
to
it all
simple
face.
things.
From the CEO of Safe Harbor. Right?
Yes.
You need to watch
Final
Elf
word.
is really
Yeah.
where we're at, right? I love it. I love it.
Love it.
Hey, before we go, can Eric, would you just be willing to pray for us and pray
Sure.
for who's going to be watching this whenever they're watching it, and just pray us out?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Let's pray. Lord, I'm reminded as we're conversing and your Spirit's in the midst of all these comments and working in and through each of us in the Psalms where it says that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. Lord, we just stop and step back and we're in awe of you. We acknowledge that you have made all the children, our kids, the kids of everybody watching this, you've made them in your image. Lord, help us to step back and see the beauty in that and to enjoy the ride and not to get so caught up in all of our hang-ups that are playing out in things. But Lord, let us be taken up with you and have that assurance that you are working things out in our lives and our kids' lives, and you specialize in putting something together out of something that's imperfect. And that's what our hope is in as parents, as counselors, as pastors, whatever we are. That's what our hope is in your work that you're carrying to completion in each of us. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen.